Okay, and welcome to Predators Proclivity, where we look at the data from the season for the NHL Nashville Predators and we make comments upon it. I am your host, Preston Proctor. Okay, so a couple of announcements. First off here, this is not going to be my last show for this season, but it could be my last one for a couple of weeks. I'm going out of town, and I won't be able to do my podcasts. And this weekend, my brother's coming into town. My niece is graduating on Saturday, so we've got things planned all weekend, which is going to keep me from being able to go to the Predators Game 6 Friday night. Time still to be determined. But I will not be able to make the game Friday night. Go Preds. And depending on, we've got to get her moved out of her apartment and graduation and such. So I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to do a podcast this weekend ergo. And then once they get out of town, then I'm leaving town. So I may not be able to wrap up the season until after I get back. So keep your ears open for that. I am, hopefully the Preds wind up winning the series with Vancouver, go on and win the second round against whomever they play. Right now it's kind of looking like Edmonton. They're beating LA 3-1. But LA could come back. They have a history of coming back in playoff games. Unfortunately, they have a more recent history of losing to Edmonton in the playoffs. We'll see how that goes. They, I believe, play tonight. Game 5, Edmonton, LA in Edmonton tonight. Okay, so that's the first announcement. Second announcement, a little more personal. This is the first anniversary. I hate calling things anniversary. I haven't really come up with time with that title for that. But my dad passed away today, last year. And Carolina won last night, 4-1. My dad was not a hockey fan. Didn't know much about the sport of hockey, but my mom had a stroke years ago. She passed away a few years ago. And when I was in town once, the Hurricanes were playing. My parents lived outside Raleigh. And so I took my dad to a game there. And he really, really enjoyed it, really thought a lot about the game of hockey, and would kind of follow the Hurricanes after that. One of the reasons why I've got a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for Carolina, really liked that they play in Raleigh, and was really glad that I was able to go to a game with my dad. So. Go Hurricanes, As I mentioned in the last broadcast, we ran into a couple of Hurricane fans at the Nashville game the other night, and I really do enjoy the Hurricane tie-in that they have on those games. And it makes sense. One thing that I kind of have to say is that I don't really understand when the Predators bring out the air raid horn and they get somebody to go up there and turn it. And I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't think they do it all the time. Maybe they do. Intermissions, we usually get up and walk around. But I don't understand it. Nashville Predators, air raid signal. I don't see the connection. I want to do something to involve people. I think that's great. At some point in time, I'm going to do some research on the history of the cheers, and mostly negative cheering here in Nashville, which if you've listened off and on, I do not like negative cheering. I don't engage in it. I usually cheer for the Preds, celebrate the goal. Instead of saying, you suck, I say, go Preds, and then I sit down while they're taunting. I think that it's awesome that the entire stadium, or, most of the people are involved in that, and I think that's awesome. I just don't like negative cheering, so I don't do it. There was a lot of that when we left LA. or the last few times we went to LA, and I just don't like it. So don't do that. But anyway, so the playoff update touched on a couple of things already, but here we'll go again. Well, not again, but in the Eastern Conference, 3 of the series are now wrapped up. The Rangers beat Washington 4-0. Florida beat Tampa Bay 4-1. Panthers won 6-1 the other night, and then Carolina beat the Islanders. Oh, I think that was Florida was last night. Sorry, and then Carolina beat the Islanders in 5, 4-1. They won their last game 6-3, which is the same score that the Avalanche won last night over the Jets. So 2 of the games last night that both ended the series, both series ending 4-1, both game 5s were 6-3. I just have to look at that. And Florida won 6-1 in their game 5, also winning 4-1. So very, very kind of interesting there. But anyway, so the Rangers, Florida, and Carolina advance, beating Washington, Tampa Bay, and the Islanders. The only series left is the Boston-Toronto series, and that is still going because Toronto won last night 2-1. Boston is up 3-2, and the winner of that series will go on to play Florida. The Rangers will be meeting Carolina because of the way that the NHL does it now, that everything is set in the initial phase and they don't reorder. And the way it is set up is that the teams in the same division will play each other. The caveat to that is that their wildcard team could be from either division in that conference. And if they win, if they beat the number 1 team, then they would play the winner of the 2-3 of that division. So the Rangers were the first in the Metropolitan, winning the division. Carolina was number 2 in the division. However, they were actually number 2 in the conference, ahead of Florida, but Florida won their division, so that put them ahead, technically, actually. But Metropolitan, Carolina was the Metropolitan 2, so Metropolitan 2 will play Metropolitan 1, and that will be the matchup, and that has not been announced yet when that series will start. In the past, I believe I remember correctly, they don't wait for all the series to finish in the first round before going to the next round. So I would expect some of these series could still go on a couple more days. I'm expecting that the Rangers-Carolina will take advantage of the upcoming weekend and will start over the weekend, but I don't know that for sure yet. So there you go. That's the Eastern Conference, the only series left. Boston-Toronto, they play Thursday, tomorrow, and then Game 7 would be Saturday. In the Western Conference, we have a little bit more competition going on in the series here in the Western Conference. Dallas and Vegas are now tied 2 games each. Both teams have won on the road. Both road teams winning in the playoffs. In the regular season, the Knights won all 3, 2 in Dallas and 1 in Vegas. So I can't really tell what's going on there. Not watching the game. So, Vegas won in Dallas 4-3 and 3-1, and now Dallas has won 3-2 and 4-2 in games 3 and 4. Just kind of going back over my picks here for a second before I continue in the Western Conference. I did pick the Rangers in 5 or 6. They won in 4. I picked the Florida in 7. They won in 5. I picked the Islanders in 6. They lost in 5. And I picked the Bruins in 5, and that series is still going. They've already played 5 games. So at least I got 2. I picked the 2 teams that won. So I pretty good for me. In the Western Conference, I did pick the Stars in 5 or 6, so I could still be there. And interestingly, here we are, the Canucks Predators. The Preds won last night. Oh my gosh, the Preds won last night. It was 9 o'clock here Central Time. We tried to watch as much as we could, had to go to bed, could not stay up. And the game was scoreless until the third period when Vancouver scored first, and then the Preds got 2 more, a power play goal and the regular goal. And I went back to check, and Anthony Beauvillier did not get an assist in that game. If you remember, he was playing for Vancouver at the beginning of the season when we played there, and he had 2 assists against the Preds. He was since traded to Chicago at the end of November, and then at the trade deadline came to Nashville. So the Canucks Predators are 3-2 Canucks and play again on Friday. I was indecisive on picking the winner. I figured Canucks in 6 or Predators in 7. So if, again, I'm going to be at the game Saturday, the following game would be on Sunday. So Friday in Nashville, Sunday in Vancouver. I had Canucks in 6 or Predators in 7. So if the Canucks don't win here in Nashville for the first time this season, then the Predators, I think, will take it back in Vancouver. But Game 7s, they're exciting. That will be Sunday night. Game 7 Sunday night, Game 6 Friday night. Time to be determined. All the games on Friday the times have not been announced yet, at least not that I saw. In the next series, the Jets Avalanche, the Jets won all 3 games in the regular season. They won in Denver 4-2 and 7-0, and then Winnipeg 6-2. And now Colorado has won in 5, and the first game, the one that Winnipeg did win, was 7-6. Colorado scored 3 in the first and third, as did the Jets, except the Jets got 1 in the second. So, wow, the Jets came into the playoffs 4-0 and the last 4 and 8-2. The Avalanche 2-2 and 4-6. So the Jets really came in strong. But as we have seen throughout the season, the Jets are a streaky team. They were leading the division and then lost like 8 games in a row. And then, just as the Preds were getting ready to overtake them, the Preds lost a few. And then the Vancouver went back on a winning spree again. And I guess they had the winning spree there at the end of the season and wound up turning it into a losing spree for the playoffs. Not really what you're looking for. But there you go. That's what they did. So I guess in a way, I'm not surprised because they are a very streaky team. However, I thought they would be able to carry their momentum into the playoffs, and somehow the Avalanche did. They won 5-2, 6-2, 5-1, and 6-3. So lots of scoring in that series. Now, the last series is the Oilers. Why am I doing that? It's something I started doing a few weeks ago, and I can't get it out of my head. So the Oilers and Kings are 3-1. They play Game 5 tonight. They were 3-1 in the regular season. The Kings only won 1 in L.A., lost both in Edmonton, and lost in overtime the first game in L.A. But Game 5 is back in Edmonton, and they split the games in Edmonton. Game 2, the Kings won 5-4 for their only win. They've lost 7-4 in the first game, and then they lost 6-1 and 1-0 here in L.A. 6-1, boy, what a shellacking. But 1-0 in the last game. So they play tonight, Game 5. and Colorado is now sitting, they would play the winner of the Dallas-Vegas series, which is tied 2-2. So Colorado is going to have a little bit of time to rest. They're mentioned last time after the Rangers got their series completed that rest doesn't necessarily help in the playoffs. A lot of it definitely does not. A little bit is great because players can recover. You can stay focused, but there's a history of teams that get a lot of time off not playing well, at least initially in the series, in the following series. It's hard to say how this will affect either the Rangers or Colorado. At least the Rangers now know who their opponent is. They won 4-0, and Carolina won 4-1, so they haven't been sitting that long. There will be a gap between last night and when they start the series, but like I said, it's just Wednesday. I would expect the series to start this weekend. No surprise to either the Rangers or Carolina that they made it past. So they had to have been looking at their schedules already before they started in. And I know the teams do in general, but you would really think the Rangers and Carolina would. Although the Rangers being the President's Cup winner, we know is not the biggest marker for success in the playoffs. It's not. I probably should look into that a little bit more, but I've been doing my research on the awards, and the Stanley Cup and the President's Cup tend not to be awarded to the same teams. Anyway, so Colorado is sitting, waiting on the Dallas-Vegas matchup. Therefore, Edmonton, LA, and Vancouver, Nashville, the winners of those series will play each other. Both of those teams are still playing, and hopefully the Kings go to at least Game 6. Hopefully, at this point, Game 7 to win, just like the Preds. So those series are going to go through the weekend. The Edmonton, LA play tonight. Game 6 would be Friday, and then Game 7 Sunday. Vancouver and Nashville also Friday, Sunday, and then Dallas also Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So the Western Conference remaining games are going to be tonight, Wednesday, and then Friday and Sunday. So Western Conference, if you want to follow the Western Conference, clear out your schedule on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday because that's when the games are. So Game 5's tonight, Game 6's all on Friday, Game 7's on Sunday. The Eastern Conference, different schedule, Thursday, Saturday. So only one game. And then that game is back in Toronto, Boston, Toronto. And Boston won both in Toronto. Boston was 4-0 against Toronto this season, winning in Toronto once in an overtime and then not 4-3 and 4-1, and then also won in Boston 3-2 in a shootout and then 4-1. Both of these teams did not come into the playoffs looking very good. Boston was 1-3 in the last four, and 6-4 and 10, and Maple Leafs 0-4 and 5-5. I guess no surprise they're playing fairly evenly, even though Boston did beat the Maple Leafs in all four games in the regular season. Two of them were in March, so somewhere near the season, first two at the beginning of the season. I tend to think that games closer to the playoffs are more indicative of the series and how it would go, especially if you look at a team like the Preds at the beginning of the season weren't playing nearly as well as they were in the last part of it. They played the Canucks the first three games before December 19th, so two in October, a week apart. And then in December, looking at the Oilers-Kings, they played once at the end of December and then twice in February and then at the end of March. Unfortunately, that the later games were Oiler wins. But Oiler wins in Edmonton. They played the first 2 games in L.A. and then played the last 2 in Edmonton. So, it can kind of be a little bit more indicative because, at the end of March, it's when teams are playing, especially the teams that are just trying to get into playoffs. They have to be in playoff mode, so you can kind of get a sense of how their playoff mode matches up against the other team, especially if they're playing the team they're playing in the playoffs. So that's those series. A quick little preview of the Rangers Hurricanes, since talking about matchups. The Rangers won 2 out of 3 against Carolina in the playoffs. They won in New York in November, early November, 2-1. In the beginning of January, the Hurricanes won in New York 6-1. And then in the middle of March, the Rangers won in Raleigh 1-0. So they split the games in New York, and the Rangers won in Raleigh. So that's looking pretty evenly. Coming into the playoffs, the Rangers were 2-2 in their last 4 and 7-3. The Hurricanes were 3-1 and 7-3. Fairly even on how they came into the playoffs. The Rangers beat the Caps 4-0. The Hurricanes won 4-1 in their matchup. Maybe I should change that. I really would like to see if the Preds aren't going to win. Like to see Jonathan Quick get his name on the Stanley Cup again. I initially have the Rangers in 7. I might need to change that given the President's Cup curse. Not sure I feel quite like that yet. Wait and see how. That's not cast in stone. If this is my last podcast before that series starts, I guess I have to stick with that. But I think it's going to be a 7-game series either way, the Rangers in 7 or the Hurricanes in 7. Okay, enough about playoffs. Enough about the playoffs. Let's speak specifically about the Preds. So last night, what was different last night? Anybody? Oh, wait, I'm the only one with a microphone. Yes, so Tuesday night's game was the first time this season that Vancouver and Nashville tied the first and second periods. Not really surprised there that it's the first time. Nashville did not win the first period in Vancouver at all. But they tied the first and second periods. And this game was on the road. It was the first time this season at all, that when the Preds were on the road, the first goal was scored in the third period. It happened 3 times here in Nashville, but never until last night on the road. So that's different. Different against Vancouver is good because Vancouver has kind of owned the Nashville so far. So different is good. Okay. The Predators won the third period for the second consecutive time. And the other 3 times, and they lost the third period the other 2 times, they've never tied the third period in Vancouver. So one team has always won it. Just the last 2 times, it's been the Preds. This is the first time that they scored more than 1 goal in the third period. The only other game that had a score was their last win. So this game they scored 2 goals in the third, and the last game that they won, they scored 1 in the third, winning the third period in both of those. But in the other games, they scored 0. So that's good. They held Vancouver to one goal total, which is what they also did in the other win against Vancouver here in the playoffs. They scored like 3 or 5 in there, and when Vancouver won, they scored like 3 or 5. The other, I think even the other night, the overtime win, 4-3. So they held Vancouver to one goal. And they did not get the first goal. They did not get the first goal in last night's game. Vancouver did in the third period. And the other 2 games, playoff games in Vancouver, they got it in one. They got it in both of them, and they won one and lost one. At home, they have not, against Vancouver, gotten the first goal. So Friday night, if they get the first goal, that would be different. Different against Vancouver is good because their record against them is currently not great, but it's the playoffs. Okay. They won only one period in 4 of the 5 games that they've played in the playoffs here. They've played in the playoffs. Here in the playoffs against Vancouver, they won all 3 periods in the other game. So in 4 games, they've only won 1 period. And of those 4 games, they're 1-3 now. Last night, they tied 2 periods and they won 1. This season, when they tied 2 in the regular season, they were 6-1, again on the road, and now they're 7-1. When they only win 1 period in the regular season, they were 7-8, 8-9 now. And when you lose 0, when the Preds have lost 0 periods in the regular season, they were 15-0 on the road, and now they're 17-0. Okay, that's stats based upon last night's game. So let's look ahead to Friday night. Friday night is the 3rd home game, and against the Canucks this season, they have lost all games in Nashville. They've lost them all. 2 regular season, 2 playoff games. They have not won the first period in any of the home games. They've lost 2 and tied 2. They won the second period in the last home game, also an anomaly. And, of course, they lost that game in the last, they gave up 2 goals in the last 3 minutes and then lost a minute 2 in overtime. In the third period, they're 1-1-2. The 2 ties were the regular season, and they won the third period in the first game in Nashville. They did not win that game, but they did win the third period. And they lost the third period in the other game in Nashville. And as I said, in all 4 games against Vancouver here in Nashville, the Predators have not yet gotten the first goal. I am not a real believer that getting the first goal is a huge metric. Again, I have never played hockey, so I don't know the psychological impact of getting the first goal. But in the game in Nashville the other night, Vancouver got the first goal, and then Nashville came back and tied the first period. So, and I thought Nashville was going to wind up winning that. They were up 3-1 with 3 minutes to go and didn't win. I don't think Vancouver getting the first goal in that case mattered at that point. It's just another metric. But they did get the first goal, and they did win that game. So it's another data point. And since I'm talking about the first goal, the Preds, when they get the first goal this season, they're 16-5-2. 16-5-2 when they get it. They were 7-11. Now they're 7-13 because they, at home, have not gotten the first goal in both games against Vancouver, and they've lost both games against Vancouver. So that's almost a 2-1 advantage, getting back to a 2-1 advantage for the opponents and a 3-1 advantage for the Preds. As we know, or as you've heard me say, the Preds do have a problem in the second period. And I think we've seen that. They did play well in the second period the other night, but I think what would be a good sign for me Friday night would be if the Preds got the first goal and won the second period. If they got the first goal and they won the second period, I don't know what I'd do. I'd start, planning on having to have a broadcast for Sunday night's game. Maybe I'd live stream it. No, I don't have time to live stream. Because that game's going to be at probably 9 o'clock again. Holy cow. Anyway, so overall statistics for the Preds at home. They have a 9-goal scoring disadvantage in the first period. They have been outscored at home by 9. In the second period, they're even, and they're up by 10 in the third. And that's overall at home. Here in the playoffs, they've been outscored 5-2 in the first, 5-3 in the second, and tied 3-3 in the third. And then 0-1 in overtime. So that's the scoring disadvantage. The winning goal is most likely to be in the second period for the Preds. 39% of the time they win at home, it's in the second period. On the road, 32% of the time, generally, the winning goal is scored. And then overall, it's 37%. So from the overall, it's not a huge delta, a little higher their percentage on the road than on the road in general, overall between them and the Preds. And the opponents, it's the third period, 44% versus 34% over when away, and then overall 33. So there's not a lot of deviation between the away third goal and the overall, but for the opponents, it does rise to 44%. Interesting, I went ahead and looked at this, and in the Preds games, the home team usually wins in the second period. The home team will get the winning goal in the second period. The visiting team will get it in the third. For when the Preds are at home, it's 39%, and for the away team, or the home team, for the Preds on the road, it's 65%. And then the road team for the third period is 42 for the Preds and 44 for the opponents. Now, overall, it's 37% that the winning goal is scored in the second period. So 39% for the Preds at home is not a huge deviation. The 65% for the opponents is. So that's very statistically significant. And that is, over the course of the 41 regular season games. The 33% in the third versus 44 and 42, 42 for the Preds, 44 for the opponents. That's also significant. Really kind of, I guess that kind of plays to the home ice advantage. The home teams winning in the second period, getting the winning goal in the second period. The opponents are having to come back and win in the third. Kind of interesting, the symmetry there. At home, the Preds are 23-17-3, 9-2-3 since February 16th. The percentage of tying each period, 37% the first, second, and 27% in the third. A fairly good potential for the periods being tied. The third period being the lowest of the three makes sense. That's the end of the game. The other percentages that's an add up to 100% because you do play shootouts in overtime. The highest percentage in the first period is still 29% that the Preds will outscore by one. Like to see that, get the first goal, outscore the Vancouver by at least one. Second period, the highest percentage is 27% for the opponents to outscore the Preds, which no surprise there because they tend to play less well in the second period. For the opponents to outscore by one or two is 34%, so an additional 7% for the two. The Preds scoring either one or two more than the opponents, 29%. At least that number rises up. And no other scoring in the second period. One or two by either the Preds or the opponents or tie. So the highest percentage second period, again, is the tie. And in the third period, for the Preds to outscore by one or two, 17%. And three or four is 7% and 2%. The opponents, 10% each for 1, 2, and 3. So 30% of the time, the opponents would outscore the Preds by 1, 2, or 3 in the third period, which is higher than the tie of 27%. The Preds do have 34% of the time outscore by one or two with an additional 3 and 4 percentage there. But so 34%, I guess we want to go up to 1, 2, and 3 like we do the opponents, 30% for the opponents, 41 for the Preds. Gotta like that part of the equation. And, as I said, the Preds have a 3-1 advantage if they get the first goal and a 2-1 disadvantage if they don't. So that's running through all the numbers of the tendencies, proclivities of the Preds at home. Wrapping up the update on the playoffs. Again, tonight we have the Dallas-Vegas Game 5, Edmonton-LA Game 5, Game 6 for all of the series will be Friday. Dallas-Vegas will go to a Game 6 because they're tied 2-2. Edmonton-LA will go to Game 6 if LA wins tonight. And then Sunday's number of games on Sunday will depend upon Friday night. Sunday. And then the Boston games are Thursday and Saturday, Boston-Toronto. So that's your playoff update and very exciting playoffs. Definitely looking forward to the Predators continuing their season by winning. And go Preds. Good win last night. Very, very happy to see that. Would have loved for that game to be earlier. A 9:00 start. That's just 7:00 in Vancouver. So that's not, that part of it is not so bad. It's the tough thing about the Western Conference. Spans 3 time zones. You've got teams in the Central, Mountain, and Pacific. The Eastern Conference has teams in the Central and the Eastern, but the bulk of them are in the Eastern Eastern time zone. So I guess in that case, a lot of games are scheduled on top of each other. So I guess that's the disadvantage there. If you wanted to watch 2 of your Eastern Conference teams, they're probably playing at the same time since they're all in the same time zone. But hey, when it comes to playoff time, they're going to be playing at a time that you can be up, or I can be up. Some of you may be night owls. I know my nephew this game would have been just fine for him, except he probably was playing a concert last night. But normally he's up till like 4 a.m. because he when he's playing on Broadway, normally he plays the 10 to 2 shift, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift. And then he's got to go home and chill out. So he doesn't go to bed till like 4 or 5 a.m. So this 9 o'clock, if he's not playing, it would have been right in the middle of his day. Probably didn't like that. Probably thought it was on too early. Anywho, that is your playoff update. You have been listening to Predators Proclivity. I'm your host, Preston Proctor. Go Preds. And Game 5, Friday night here in Nashville. Time to be announced. We will see how that plays out. Thanks for listening. Y'all have a great day.